I first remind members that social distancing measures are in place in the Chamber and across the Holyrood campus, so please take care to observe these measures over the course of the afternoon's business. And the next item of business is portfolio questions, and the portfolio today is health and sport. Question number 1, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what the impact on Scotland might be of the UK Health Secretary not ruling out mandatory COVID-19 vaccination, and to what extent it considers that such a position could be exploited by conspiracy theorists and so-called anti-vaxxers.
Jean Freeman.
Deployment of the COVID-19 vaccine in England is, of course, a matter for the UK Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. We anticipate in Scotland that take-up for a COVID-19 vaccine will be exceptionally high, and while we strongly recommend that those eligible to receive vaccines should do so, vaccination is not mandatory and we're not planning anything other than that voluntary acceptance. We will work to inform the public so that they can be assured of vaccine safety and efficacy and can understand the benefits of vaccination both for themselves and the wider population. We believe that the value of this approach and our view on the importance of vaccination is shared by most people in Scotland, with some of the highest uptake rates in Europe for our national programmes.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. At a time when we know at last that we have light at the end of the tunnel through the imminent distribution of 3 safe and effective new vaccines, what steps will the Scottish Government take to encourage widespread uptake across Scotland, particularly for usually marginalised groups who may not normally have a high level of vaccination cover?
Jean Freeman.
So this is a really important part of this question. I'm grateful to Mr Gibson. So we will undertake a number of actions for the population as a whole, and then some specifics to reach those that we have not traditionally been as effective in reaching. For the population as a whole, the first set of public information, and I want to specifically call it public information, is around the safety and the efficacy of the vaccine, and that will be supported by clinical voices. So this is not simply NHS and far less government voices, but clinical voices talking about how vaccines go through a process in order to be sure that they're safe and effective. And these vaccines are no less so, even though the timeline has been constrained for many good reasons, not least the work of the global scientific and research community. We will then make sure that every household in January has a household door drop, in other words, information direct to every home that explains again about safety and efficacy, and also then explains about the specific delivery mechanisms. In trying to ensure that we make accessing the vaccine as easy as possible for people, we will, of course, use the mass vaccination centres of drive-through and walk-in, but we are working very closely now with our local authority partners. I'm very grateful to COSLA leaders for their enthusiastic offer of support and work with us to look at high street, I would put in inverted commas, local, accessible, small vaccination centres, as well as mobile units that we will deploy, particularly for our more rural parts of Scotland and the remote areas, and including the islands. So we will have a range of places that people can go in order to be vaccinated. And of course, for some, we will take the vaccine as they come through and the properties are more assured. We will take the vaccine to some, certainly of our older population, and others for whom mobility is more difficult, to them in their homes.
Question number 2, Tom Arthur.
To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with amateur football organisations regarding the current COVID-19 restrictions.
Jean Freeman.
No.
It's Mr Fitzpatrick.
Oh, terribly sorry. Would that be Joe Fitzpatrick then, sitting away up the back?
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government works closely with the Scottish Amateur Football Association on a range of issues and has had regular dialogue over recent months about the impact of the pandemic on the amateur game.
Tom Arthur.
I've written previously to the Minister on behalf of Thorn Athletic, who are based in Johnston in my constituency, seeking a greater understanding of the rationale and evidence base for restricting amateur football at level 3. From this correspondence, the Minister will be aware of the important community work undertaken by Thorn Athletic, and in particular their positive impact on the mental health and well-being of young men. I therefore ask the Minister what support has been put in place to support young men in particular who will be hard hit by the restrictions on amateur football and team sports.
Joe Fitzpatrick.
So the Scottish Government absolutely recognise the benefits that sport brings, not just to our physical health, but also to our mental health, and the key role that sports bodies, including football, play in facilitating that. That's why, as a government, we are right up to level 3. We have managed to provide an exemption for under-18s to continue to participate in sport, including contact sports like football. The Mental Health Minister obviously has been working on a range of support for mental health. But the member is absolutely right. Our football clubs across the country do a great job, and we really want to get people back playing. The way, the route map for doing that is to get prevalence down across Scotland, and to get all levels into lower levels, lower tiers, so that sport can continue as before, because it is so important for our mental and physical health. But we have to make sure that the measures we have in place protect against the spread of the virus, and football is a contact sport.
I'll take a couple of quite short supplementaries, please. James Kelly, who will be followed by Beatrice Wishart.
Thank you. The Minister is aware of the mental health benefits of the return to amateur football and the submissions from clubs like Rutherglen Glencairn. Can I therefore ask the Minister when this decision will be reviewed, in light of the fact that amateur football is returning in England? There's a great desire to see the same happen across all the country in Scotland.
Joe Fitzpatrick.
Well, I'm not sure what the final details are in England. Clearly, amateur football is happening in Scotland now in levels 1 and 2 areas in Scotland, and obviously we all hope that more parts of Scotland will move into level 2, so that football can continue and to recommence. I think in England, it looks like it's clear that it's allowed in level 1 and 2, as is the case in Scotland. But if you look at the wording, which I don't think has been clarified, it's not so clear for level 3 in England. Obviously, that's a matter for the English government to take forward. We've got to take the best advice we can. We know how the virus spreads. The virus spreads from close contact. We know that football is a contact sport, in that it is not possible to play the game. It's possible not to have tackling, so it's possible not to have physical contact, but it's not possible to play the game without that 2 metre distance that we consider to be close contact for the spread of the virus. I'm desperately keen that we can bring football back at all levels, all across Scotland. But we have to take a balanced approach, which is why I was so pleased that we were able to extend the playing of football at the under-18 level right into level 3. But be no doubt, we absolutely understand the difficulty that the restrictions around the pandemic, particularly at the level 3 and level 4, poses for so many people across Scotland.
And Beatrice Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On 4th November, the Minister confirmed he would look again at Level 1 guidance on indoor contact sports. I've received further representations about difficulties with outdoor football in Shetland in the winter. Can the Minister provide an update on what progress has been made?
Joe Fitzpatrick.
I think, as I said last time, the member makes a strong case, particularly when levels of the virus are lower. But we do need to be careful to make sure that we don't inadvertently do something that would then results in levels in places like Shetland rising, which would then have a wider impact. So I know that our clinical leads are very keen on making sure that people, particularly in those areas with lower prevalence and with the weather challenges that Shetland has, are able to continue playing sport. So I know that there's a positive ear on these matters, and it's something that we continue to look at, particularly for those areas like Shetland.
Question number 3, Emma Harper.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will introduce in NHS Dumfries and Galloway an equivalent of the Highlands and Islands travel scheme, which allows patients to receive full non-means tested reimbursement for travel for medical appointments over 30 miles.
Jean Freeman.
So let me start by saying I completely understand the impetus, if you like, behind Ms Harper's question and some of the difficulties that constituents in her area will face. The Scotland-wide Patient Travelling Expenses Scheme provides support for patients in receipt of qualifying benefits. In addition, all health boards have the discretion to reimburse patient travelling expenses depending on individual circumstances. The Highlands and Islands Travel Scheme, to which she refers, recognises that patients in the Highlands and Islands often face significant additional travel relative to those residing in other areas of Scotland. My officials, however, will undertake a review of arrangements for patient travel very early in the new year, and I have asked them to conclude that review very quickly, and I will be very happy to provide further updates on this as it progresses to Ms Harper.
Emma Harper.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that positive response. Cancer care and travel in D&G has been an ongoing issue since well before the COVID-19 pandemic, and I met with the Cabinet Secretary over a year ago and have again written to her with more detail about this. As well as travel reimbursement, many patients across Galloway would prefer referral to Glasgow Pathway instead of Edinburgh for cancer treatment, meaning much shorter journey times. This requires NHS D&G to be aligned with the West of Scotland Cancer Network instead of the South East Cancer Network. Can the Cabinet Secretary commit to assisting with progressing the changes with NHS D&G, and will she step in and act if nothing is forthcoming from the board?
Jean Freeman.
Two points probably in response to that supplementary. The first thing is to say that the information that Ms Harper provided me with respect to travel will be taken account of in that early review. And the second is with respect to the Cancer Network. I don't believe that NHS Dumfries and Galloway are reluctant in this matter. Work is underway on this, but I am happy to commit to providing Ms Harper with an update early next week on the progress that's been made. And as she knows, I am supportive, very supportive, of patients being able to have a choice in these matters, particularly when there is so much else in terms of their situation and suffering from cancer, where they can at times feel powerless.
Question number 4, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it will respond to reports of increased mental ill health as a result of the pandemic and the restrictions.
Claire Hawkey.
On October 8th, we published Scotland's Mental Health Transition and Recovery Plan. This outlines our response to the mental health effects of the pandemic. The plan is comprehensive, containing over 100 actions, and it outlines a set of key actions which we will take forward at pace. It is fully informed by a consideration of evidence provided by our Mental Health Research Advisory Group. As well as promoting good mental health and well-being, the plan prioritises rapid and easily accessible support for those in distress and the safe, effective treatment of people living with mental illness. A tailored programme of work will help individual NHS boards respond effectively to the anticipated increase in demand in the months ahead. And it also covers the mental health impacts on people living with long-term physical health conditions or disabilities.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for that answer. Yesterday, Deputy Chief Constable Will Kerr presented a troubling new report to the Scottish Police Authority, laying out the scale of the mental health crisis in our communities. And he told them that, and I quote, level of demand has outstripped capacity and Police Scotland's professional ability to deal with it. He also said that the statistics published this week showing 833 probable suicides in Scotland in the year before this pandemic was an increase that, as he said, should worry us all. I've asked the Minister before about improving suicide reporting so we can get something closer to real-time alerts and crisis response services can be better informed and prepared. So will the Minister make the commitment today that this will happen for the new year?
Claire Hawkey.
I thank Alex Cole-Hamilton for raising this very important issue. Every one of these lives lost has been a tragedy, and my sympathies go to those who have been bereaved by suicide. We work very closely with the Suicide Prevention Leadership Group, and we will continue to do so. There is a range of work going on, and for the sake of brevity, Presiding Officer, I won't speak of all of that, but I'm more than happy to write to Mr Cole-Hamilton to outline the breadth of work that is ongoing. But as an example, in September, with the Suicide Prevention Leadership Group, we launched a public awareness campaign and new branding for suicide prevention in Scotland. The United to Prevent Suicide programme is aimed to help to break the stigma around talking about suicide and to assist people to access support more readily.
Question number 5, Angus MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it's had with NHS Forth Valley regarding capacity planning at the Forth Valley Royal Hospital Intensive Care Unit in light of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Jean Freeman.
As we set out in our NHS winter plan, our boards are working to both plan and manage the competing pressures on the NHS from COVID-19, including the vaccine programme, and from the normal winter pressures, whilst maintaining as many non-COVID services as possible, in addition to their emergency, urgent and trauma care. We have the ability nationally to double ICU capacity to 360 beds within 1 week, treble to 585 within 2 weeks, and if required, extend this to over 700. Within this, NHS Forth Valley has a maximum surge capacity of 29 ICU beds. However, mutual aid arrangements are also in place between NHS boards to ensure there is enough capacity across the system to deal with varying levels of peak demand.
Angus MacDonald.
Thank you. I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her reply. Since lodging this question, I've had a very constructive meeting with NHS Forth Valley, including with Chief Executive Cathy Cowan. And it's clear to me that despite the obvious pressures, NHS Forth Valley are on top of their game at Forth Valley Royal Hospital, and the situation at ICU is currently under control. So I have no supplementary to ask, unless the Cabinet Secretary wishes to join me in congratulating the whole team at Forth Valley Royal, and in particular the staff at ICU who are working in full PPE day in, day out, week in, week out, and doing a tremendous job.
Jean Freeman.
So I'm grateful to Mr MacDonald. I'm glad that he had a constructive and positive meeting with the Board Chief Executive. That is what I would expect. And I am very delighted to join him in congratulating the team, particularly the ICU team, but others in Forth Valley Royal Hospital and across that board, and indeed and very specifically across all our health boards, whichever part of the system they're working in. Our staff are quite extraordinary and they're doing tremendous work.
Question number 6, Jamie Green.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government how people with chronic health conditions are being supported to access GP services in light of the added pressures resulting from COVID-19.
Jean Freeman.
So general practice has continued to provide services to patients throughout the pandemic, albeit with unavoidable restrictions to accommodate necessary infection prevention and control measures. However, due to the pressures of COVID, some routine disease management has needed to be paused, but only in those instances where it is deemed clinically safe to do so. Patients with complex and multiple long-term conditions continue to receive the support of GP practices, which are working hard to prioritise those at high clinical risk, both through remote consultations and, where appropriate, face-to-face appointments. Where MSPs have specific concerns on behalf of their constituents, the relevant board should be able to assist them in the first instance.
Jamie Green.
Can I thank the Health Secretary for that answer? I've been contacted by a number of constituents from the west of Scotland who have not seen their GP since March, including one from Saltcoats who has rheumatoid arthritis and is in chronic pain and has only been receiving telephone consultations with her GP throughout the pandemic, which is far from ideal and causing much anxiety. So can I ask the Health Secretary whether there are any national plans to support our GPs to increase and restore more in-person appointments for patients with chronic conditions? And in this instance, if I pass details, would health officials consider looking into this specific case? Thank you.
Jean Freeman.
So just in response to the last part of Mr Green's question, I would be very happy if he cares to give me those specific details to look at the specific case that he references. The government has provided a great deal of financial support to our GP practices in negotiation and consultation with them. I don't think it is about financial support to them. I think it is about their decisions that they make, and it will vary from practice to practice, oftentimes dependent on the building that they're in and the physical location that they're in, the degree to which they can create space to see patients face-to-face, given the necessary requirements to reduce waiting room numbers, to have that 2-metre distance, to wear PPE and so on, and the between patient times that are needed much more so than in normal times in order to ensure that the necessary cleaning between patients is undertaken. And that will inevitably impact on the number of face-to-face appointments that GPs can offer, varying, as I said, depending on sometimes the physical infrastructure in which they work. GPs then, when that is the case, they make their own clinical judgments about the patients on their list that they expect to see and feel that they need to see face-to-face, depending on that judgment, as well as making room and time for emergency calls and so on. But of course, the digital access is video as well as telephone. And if there are GP practices who feel that they don't have sufficient video consultation access, then again, we're very happy to look at how we might help those independent contractors deliver the best possible service, which I know they want to do.
And a short supplementary, please, from Monica Lennon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I know the Cabinet Secretary is sympathetic to the needs of chronic pain patients, including those who were waiting quite a long time for injections and infusions pre-COVID. Can I ask for an update in terms of access to treatment for patients who do need infusions and injections to manage their pain, particularly in the Lanarkshire area where people have been very concerned about the current waits? Thank you.
Jean Freeman.
So I'm grateful to Ms Lennon for her supplementary question. This is an area I hope she is assured that I take chronic pain very, very seriously. I think often, and I understand why, patients who suffer chronic pain feel that their situation is not treated as seriously as it deserves to be. As it happens, yesterday morning, I had a long conversation with our Deputy National Clinical Director, Dr Harden. I think Ms Lennon knows him, on a lot of the detail of this that he is taking forward. I don't have that detail with me, but I'm very happy for that to be pulled together with that update and make sure that she receives it in the course of the next week or so.
Question number 7, Andy Whiteman.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it collects data on the settings where COVID-19 is being transmitted within each local authority, and if so, whether it will publish this.
Jean Freeman.
So the Scottish Contact Survey collects data from 1,500 adults each week and asks about situations where current evidence on the virus indicates an increased risk of transmission. The survey has run since August and results are published each week on the Scottish Government website. However, the survey is not extensive enough in terms of the total number who are surveyed to enable robust figures for each local authority area to be pulled out and published.
Andy Whiteman.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. She'll note, of course, and recall that in Aberdeen, when Aberdeen went into lockdown, that was due to hospitality. Glasgow was due more to households. The current tier restrictions are fixed for each tier, regardless of the specific risks posed by different settings. She mentions that there is some data, but why cannot the data used from Test and Protect be used to inform decisions about different restrictions applying to different tiers, depending on the settings within which transmission is occurring?
Jean Freeman.
So data from Test and Protect, in as much as data that comes from the conversations that our contact tracers have with individuals who are the index case about where they have been and what they have been doing in the period before they tested positive and so on, is available to us, and we do consider that. But that is dependent, if you like, on the individual's recollection of all the places that you have been. So whilst it is important, I don't think it could be considered overly robust in the way that we would need to do that in order to be able to publish that kind of information. But of course, also, as Mr Whiteman knows, there is no straightforward cause and effect in the transmission of COVID-19. What we know about the virus is that it will take any opportunity to go from one individual to another, and therefore any situation or setting where a number of individuals gather, then those situations or settings are ones where the risk of transmission is greater than in situations or settings where we do not have large numbers of people. And that is why, and we need to also distinguish between the situation where we're looking at outbreaks and how we manage those outbreaks and what measures need to be taken in those outbreaks, and in other situations where we're looking at a wider community prevalence and how we then need to take steps in order to bring down the overall community prevalence as opposed to the outbreaks. And indeed, First Minister at First Minister's questions today and he gave us an example of that in terms of how we're currently viewing the situation in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire, where though numbers are up, our current view of why that is the case is that it is confined to outbreaks, although we will continue to monitor it very carefully indeed.
I'm going to allow question 8, but if we could try and keep it tight. Question number 8, Maureen Watt.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government to what extent the suppression of COVID infection rates has been impacted by licensing restrictions.
Jean Freeman.
So the Scottish Contact Survey, which I just mentioned, found that the number of people visiting pubs significantly decreased from 34% in the first week of October to 21% in early November. As I've just said, the way the virus spreads makes a definitive cause and effect analysis difficult. However, the R number reduced from between 1.2 to 1.6 on the 7th of October to between 0.8 and 1 on the 19th of November. So there is, as we would expect from our understanding of the epidemiology and the transmission of this virus, linkages between those situations where larger numbers of people gather and then a reduction in the opportunity to gather in that way and the impact on the R number.
Maureen Watt.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. We were all ecstatic when Scotland qualified for Euro 2020, but the people in the North East, including my constituents, were enraged to see social media footage emerge of the patrons in an Aberdeen pub not following social distancing. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that it is vital for all licensed premises and individuals to strictly follow protocols to avoid undoing everyone's good work to suppress this virus?
Jean Freeman.
Well, yes, I do, and I think it is appropriate to take this opportunity to commend the very many businesses, the overwhelming majority of businesses of different kinds across Scotland who are working very, very hard indeed in order to ensure that they comply with the guidance and that they help their customers do so too. The fact of the matter is, though, that whilst businesses have a responsibility, government undoubtedly has a responsibility, as individuals, each and every one of us has a responsibility to ensure that we comply with the guidance and we do everything we can to ensure that the virus is suppressed. And at the end of the day, that individual responsibility should not be either ducked or ignored.
That concludes questions on the Health and Sport portfolio, and we'll move on to the next item of business. Please make sure to maintain social distancing measures if you're leaving the chamber.